Okay, welcome class to another lecture on scientific method and inquiry and hypothesis. So in the last lectures, we have just have an introduction about research and a generic process in which you can use in pursuing your research in your research phase. So hopefully, if you remember like your old school science book, you might have gone through the scientific method, hypothesis, the way of science. You might have gone through it and you might remember it to some extent. So this lecture will be like kind of a revision of that lecture, and we'll be revisiting some basic concepts you might have forgotten. So let's have a quick overview of some different what is scientific method. So anyone who can tell me about what is scientific method? Anyone who have any inkling or any idea what can be a scientific method? Anyone? What does it mean by scientific method? Scientific inquiry. Okay, how do you define science? Okay, let me put it this way. Anyone, if I ask you what is science, what is that? No one? Yes, Samad, please.
सर साइंस में हम कोई भी ऐसी चीज के बारे में हम स्टडी करते हैं जो कि टेस्ट हम इसको कर सके एक्सपेरिमेंट्स के थ्रू.
Yes, precisely. Science anything which can be tested and जिसकी testing के बाद we formulate some kind of theory or a fact. Okay, so that is the scientific method. So that is science, that making some kind of observations, and after repeated observation you form a theory, you test it, you define your own experiment, you test it, and you said yes, that is what is happening, that is what is science. A fundamental understanding of anything, how things work, basically, that is science. Okay, and so coming on to the scientific method, it is a systematic investigation of theories and hypotheses. So coming back to the word hypothesis, what does the word hypothesis mean? Anyone? Hypothesis, anyone want to give a shot at what is hypothesis? It is very integral for research. All of your research is based on some kind of hypothesis. So it is a kind of an educated guess about how things work, how what x and y, how x and y are related, how x affects y. Okay, so that is hypothesis. So we hypothesize, okay, x is influencing y or y is influencing x. So this is kind of a hypothesis. So it's a systematic way of systematic investigation of theories and hypotheses, and that can be subject to experimentation. Anything which you say which can be experimented and can do research, that is hypothesis. For example, give me for example, I'll start with an example that my hypothesis is that eating sugar in the long term, excessive sugar intake, will increase your chances of diabetes. Okay, this is a statement. Can it be tested? Can it be experimented? Anyone? So I think I'll start calling out names. If no one is responding, then I'll start calling by everyone by the name. Yes, Hamza, please.
यस सर, बिल्कुल ये टेस्ट की जा सकती है. अगर हम इन कुछ सैंपल अगर फर्स्ट करें कोई इंडिविजुअल्स को लें और उन पे चेक करें कि अगर जो है ना मतलब शुगर के इनटेक से उनका डायबिटीज लेवल इंक्रीज करता है, तो इससे बिल्कुल टेस्ट की जा सकती है.
Okay, very good. Okay, so which statement which is testable, which can be experimented on, that is called hypothesis. Okay, and how do you define your own hypothesis? Okay, let me put it this way. How many of you have done your research in your bachelor's? I think planners, they raised their hands previously, right? So Hamza, Samad, you did a research, I think, in your bachelor's. So what was your hypothesis in that research? What was your main problem And what was a hypothesis? Yes, Amit, please.
Sir, the main problem was the increasing climate change.
Okay, so that was a problem statement, kind of. And what was the
Yes, sir.
hypothesis? What thing did you test? What was the statement?
उसमें सर
according to the
हाइपोथेसिस ये था कि यस सर हाइपोथेसिस ये था सर क्लाइमेट चेंज की वजह से जो ग्लेशियर लेक्स है उनकी आउटबर्स्ट जो है वो क्लाइमेट चेंज के आउटकम की वजह से ये चीजें होती हैं.
Okay, so you're saying globes, so basically glacier flooding is caused by climate change. So that was a hypothesis. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Or so you tested it basically, okay, how climate change is basically impacting or causing an increase of flooding events. Okay. Anyone else who wants to share their bachelor's research? Rida? Taha? Nazar?
Sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Taha.
Sorry, वो mute हुआ था, वो खुल नहीं रहा
Okay.
था.
Rida, please explain your research, let's say bachelor's research.
सर बैचलर रिसर्च में मेरा टॉपिक एक्सेसिबिलिटी एनालिसिस पर था. तो सर उसमें हम लोगों ने हाइपोथेसिस की अगर बात करें तो उसमें यही देखा था कि हम लोगों ने जो हाइपोथेसिस बनाई थी उसमें यही था कि जो वर्क प्लेसेस हैं हाउसिंग स्कीम से अगर उनका हम डिस्टेंस देखें, मतलब वर्क प्लेसेस ज्यादातर डाउनटाउन में थे, सीबीडी में जिसको कहेंगे कि सिटी सेंटर में. तो सर वहां से मतलब जो हमने हाउसिंग स्कीम्स ली थी जो कि अच्छी बनी हुई हाउसिंग स्कीम्स थी, मतलब वहां से जब हम डिस्टेंस देखते थे तो बहुत ज्यादा था. तो सर हमारी जो ओवरऑल रिसर्च थी वो यही थी कि एवरेज डिस्टेंस भी मतलब काफी ज्यादा बन रहा था, एटलीस्ट मतलब it was 10 to 15 kilometer. So, sir,
Okay,
इसकी
okay.
basis पे side.
Okay, let me put it this way. What was your research question?
सर रिसर्च क्वेश्चन ये था कि मतलब कि क्यों जो है ये इतना ज्यादा डिस्टेंसेस जो है वो क्यों लोगों को कवर करने पड़ते हैं डेली कम्यूटिंग में, कि लॉन्ग कम्यूटिंग क्यों है, इसकी क्या इसके रूट कॉजेज हैं, क्या वजह है.
Okay, so basically your hypothesis could be it can be construed as or constructed as workplaces in, I don't know, maybe Lahore city or whatever city you did.
Yes, Lahore city.
Okay, so there are longer commuter distances between workplaces and people employed in that workplaces. So you
Yes,
tested
sir.
it. So that was a kind of hypothesis. Okay, very good. Yes, Taha.
जी सर, इसमें मेरा ये था जो आज़ादी चौक है लाहौर मीनार पाकिस्तान के पास, उसके सर मुझे 5 साल पहले था, मुझे तो सारा एग्जैक्टली याद भी नहीं है. तो उसमें यही
Okay,
था
just
कि
have a
उसके
guess.
सोशल और इन्वायरमेंटल इम्पैक्ट्स जो थे ना, वो सर उसको मैंने स्टडी किया था.
Okay, so
On
your
surrounding
hypothesis could,
population.
so you can say that आपने कौन सा phenomena की बात की? Which phenomena?
Sir, only social and environmental aspects of the surrounding population.
किस चीज का?
सर जो उनकी ड्यूरिंग कंस्ट्रक्शन और अब ऑपरेशन के फेज में जो उनके
Okay. So constructing of that that Azadi Chowk, impacts of Azadi Chowk on social. So आपका hypothesis can be written as there are Azadi Chowk construction have severe socio-economic impacts on the surrounding communities. So that thing is a statement which can be tested, which can be analyzed. So anything statement which is logical can be tested. Logical which can be tested will be hypothesis. So in your research, you would be giving maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 hypotheses, which would be directly in line with your objective and with your research questions. So hypotheses are kind of, I would say, the heart of your research. It is a very important part of your research. So depending upon your hypothesis, your objectives, question, and your data collection need will be estimated. So another point of coming back to the scientific method, that after the hypothesis, testing that particular hypothesis, we can retest it again and again. And if it becomes after certain, we can observe that, okay, this kind of construction, quoting Taha's research, this kind of construction will have socioeconomic impacts in the future. And let's have another similar case study on this construction site. And after 4 or 5 years, reaching the same conclusion that these are more or less common socioeconomic impacts of construction sites on the surrounding communities, we can come up with a solution that will, of course, not remove the impacts, but maybe help in minimizing the impacts. What are the common impacts and how these can be mitigated? Maybe we can incorporate that in the future policies in which should be implemented on the construction sites, that will ultimately safeguard the health, the socioeconomic and the economic vitality of the surrounding communities. So this is how the science works. The social science, basically, social science research works. Here's another guideline scheme. So more or less, you're going to be defining the question, your objectives. You're going to be collecting your data, forming a hypothesis, testing that hypothesis, analyzing that hypothesis, and then publish your results, and maybe retest by the other scientist. For example, a concept being given back in the for example, for a poverty issue, or the issue of this multidimensional poverty index. Then we came to some different concepts of poverty reduction papers. So what happened? That concept was given by someone, and then what happened? That was then implemented in different areas to validate that, okay, this phenomena is very, very much prevalent in the developing countries. So yes, testing similar formula or testing, let's say, a similar hypothesis for other case studies is also very important to validate that the concept or the phenomena is accurate or reliable. It is accurately describing the, for example, what happened most of the how the science progresses is basically the idea is formulated in a particular scope, in a particular scenario, and then we test, okay, what will happen if this happens. This will happen if this is the current situation. That same phenomena is then replicated in another study, which might validate the previous research, might reject the previous research, or might contribute saying that, okay, the first research was okay, but this can be added to refine the theory. So over time, many researchers are basically refining one theory. So that is how one particular fact theory is formed over time. So this is this is a method of another way of remembering things, scientific method. Make observation. So kids are basically, they are natural scientists. They are very curious about things. What is that? Why is this happening? You might have heard young children. They start at a certain age. They will start questioning things. Why this? What is that? Why is it happening? Explain. So this is what is the curiosity. This is the scientific method. This is the natural method. Just share here.
सर वही मुझे लगा वो क्वेश्चन पूछे थे कि व्हाई दिस हैपेंस, वही सर के दे एक तरह से वो अपने दिमाग में हाइपोथेसिस फॉर्म कर रहे होते हैं और वो क्वेश्चंस के थ्रू या फिर अपने एक्सपीरियंस के थ्रू जो लॉजिक्स डिराइव कर रहे होते हैं उसके थ्रू वो अपने हाइपोथेसिस को वैलिडेट करते हैं या फिर वो नई हाइपोथेसिस फॉर्म कर रहे होते हैं.
Yes, Arya. You explained it perfectly. So this is what you as a research student, you have to just open your mind and start observing what's happening in this current society. And how do we just then form, okay, how this problem can be solved? Okay, maybe from this point of view. Then you can do your own experiment, do your data collection, do analysis, and then that will help you achieve or resolve that particular problem. So that is, and especially is the point is that if you've done your research, and if it's not published, that research is useless. It's only for your library or maybe your own personal growth, which is important. Also, but that will not contribute towards the overall scientific agenda. It will not contribute to the current. I don't know how many planets. Let's talk about planets. How many planets do research, for example? Every year, 20, 30 planets, they are graduated from bachelors. How many of research is being published? So if it's not published, we can say that the planning research in Pakistan or the planning is not happening in Pakistan because research outputs are not available anywhere. Similarly, if you look at other professions, how many civil engineers are publishing their, okay, not bachelor's, master's research even. Okay, if it is not being published, then the engineering research, or in Pakistan, the research is very much lacking in engineering discipline because research is not published. There is no measure to evaluate a research being in Pakistan. So that is also true for many other fields as well. For example, architects, they are not very much concerned with research. They are more concerned with design, and design is something not part of research. Design can be a part of a solution, but it's not a particular research problem. I've seen some architects face this problem in which the output is like, okay, we'll design a building, but that is okay, that can be one objective, one part of the research, but it is not overall research. So once you go into the research, you have to critically rethink that what is your hypothesis, what is the problem you are going to be focusing on, and how you will be going to be analyzing the research. That is the whole. If there is any discrepancy in this process, that means your research is flawed. So you have to be critically, you have to be aware, keenly aware of what steps you are following in producing the research, in undertaking the research. Okay, coming back. So another way of like the scientific method is that because a lot of research has already been done, so that question might arise in your mind that okay, I can, whatever I think, research is already been done. Whatever I think, it's already happening. So finding a research gap is very important. It's very difficult. I accept that finding a research gap is difficult. But after continuous reading, you might be able to find that gap. After continuous literature review, after more critical thinking, you will find, okay, so many research has been done on this and this and that, but from this particular angle, from this particular approach, from this particular aspect, that is missing in this current literature. That is the research gap, and that you can like kind of exploit that potential. So, but actually what happened, this is just a funny comic basically. So it's because of limitations of your times and time and everything, and because science has now made all the easy observations already. For example, let's say gravity. Already research is being done, which is very much observed. You're being observant, you can easily guess that okay, gravity is there. So many of fundamental research is already been done. So more or less, your research might be kind of a suggestion, kind of a small contribution to a larger, you can say, scientific literature. Okay. So another problem is this confirmation bias this is happening, that social media has created so much noise that scientific, like people have moved on from thinking critically and just observing things on social media. So another thing to maybe that contributes towards this. Okay, moving on. So elements of scientific method. So first of all, we need to know what the concept is and what is the operational definition of it. For example, I'm talking about, I'm talking about the concept of vulnerability, for example. So vulnerability can be due to many things. Am I talking vulnerability of computer networks? How much computer is your vulnerable? Are we talking about climate change vulnerability? Am I talking about poverty or food insecurity vulnerability? So contextualizing your defining your operational definition of the concept is very important. Then, depending upon that definition, you need to know what is the scale on which it should be measured. It can be measured. So that is very important. Then is hypothesis, the explanation of something. Then prediction. Okay, okay, if this is happening due to this, this might be true. In the long term, more research is needed, but we think that this problem is due to this thing. So that is the whole point of research. And then conducting actual experiments to test all of the observations. Nowadays, due to this economic, you can say, progress and competition all over the world, most of the research are now being driven by grants, driven by commercialization. So you might face a problem if you're a researcher. That is especially true for the researchers nowadays, that depending upon the grants which is being given by the governments or the international NGOs or UN, we have to, especially in abroad in developed countries, many things are being driven by the funds available, because funds are only available for solving one particular problems. That might be government's priorities, or that might be industry priorities. So now the scientific method is more or less defined by it, or you can say directed by the fundings. Okay, again, scientific method is, again, we are going to be experimentation and exploring observation and answering the questions. It is usually to analyze cause and effect between two variables, and maybe kind of doing some kind of analysis that might be kind of a predictive modeling, or like kind of a behavior modeling, in which we can analyze or predict what will happen if these certain conditions prevail in the society. Any question till now? Okay. Some steps are like, it starts with a question like about observation about how, what, when, who, which, why, or where. So that is a kind of a research question that will help you in formulating your hypothesis. So ask a question, and then research that, is research already been conducted on this or not? So you need to review the literature. Maybe the literature have already analyzed. For example, you don't need to test the theory of gravity. You know the gravity is there. Why are we not reproducing the same thing? Why are we not replicating? Maybe in Pakistan, the law of gravity varies. No, because that's already been observed so many times. It's available in the literature, and we have progressed far more beyond simple gravity acceleration. Okay, so you do a background research study. Maybe the question which is in your mind, that is already answered in the literature. And even maybe if you think that, okay, I'm doing this urban flooding in context of Pakistan, and I'm checking that, okay, climate change is causing urban flooding in Pakistan, you just need to go back to the literature. There are already papers published that yes, climate change is contributed toward the urban flooding in Pakistan. So the question is there. So do a background study. Maybe then you can say, okay, we know climate change is causing urban flooding in Pakistan. Why? Okay, we have the answer. How can Pakistan mitigate the impacts of urban flooding? Okay, now you are going specific. Now you are formulating your hypothesis. That, okay, then you think about it. Okay, maybe let's talk about institutions then. Okay, how are the institutions combating with the climate change? How are they kind of reacting or preparing themselves for climate change or floods? Then you say, okay, research has already been conducted on this thing. Then you say, okay, is this institutional structure, mechanisms, or finance, for example, is it enough to tackle this problem? No, this has not been available in the literature. This sort of research has not been published anywhere. Okay, this is your gap. This is your hypothesis. Now maybe you can read more and then start testing, okay, what kind of mechanism, what kind of policy could benefit Pakistan to combat or tackle with the issue of urban flooding. So you construct your hypothesis. You make an intellectual guess about how things are working or how it should work. So you formulate a question. Then test your hypothesis by conducting your experiment. Now you have to be neutral about it. Many students have the problem. They think that the hypothesis which they formulated it should be true. Technically, you should be unbiased about it. Your hypothesis can be wrong. Many hypotheses which I undertook in my research, they were falsified. My results were not, you can say, supporting my hypothesis. So I had to change my hypothesis. I had to change my research. Yes, one.
सर इन
Yes,
केस
okay.
वही बात अगर फॉल्स आए तो क्या उसको भी हम लोग को अपने रिजल्ट में शो करना होता कि अच्छा ये हमारा फॉल्स आया तो आगे हम उसी को कंटिन्यू करेंगे?
Okay, unfortunately, there's a little bit issue in that. If your hypothesis is wrong, then what is the point of doing that research? Your research is wrong. You need to now conduct a new research. Your hypothesis was not valid. Unfortunately, there is an issue of, I would not say too much, but there is an issue of glamour in research as well, that only those papers are published which have exceptionally good findings, because their hypothesis was good and the findings were very good. Okay, and most of the research are underappreciated, that okay, they wanted to do this but they could not find this. So although that should be published in the journals, that okay, this does not affect this, but the point is, which a thing which is not affecting anything, X is not affecting Y, then why people need to know this? Because X and Y, there is no correlation. So this kind of things limits people to publish the hypothesis if it's wrong or if it's false. So I hope you understood. Rizwan, आपको answer मिल गया आपको.
So basically like we have to just change the hypothesis again. इसी तरह ना?
Okay, for example, let me put it this way. Your hypothesis was income, past experiences, I would say. Because I'm from I have a grip on disaster, I would stay in the disaster domain. Past experiences of disaster can motivate you to evacuate. Okay, this is a hypothesis. Past experiences, my variable X, and willingness to evacuate, variable Y. X is affecting Y. Past experiences is affecting willingness to move. I do research and the findings are false. No, past experiences does not contribute towards willingness to evacuate. So what I do, I change my hypothesis. You can like change your hypothesis that in Pakistan, past experience does not matter in Pakistan, which affects willingness to evacuate. So itself, that is a hypothesis. It is called null hypothesis. So you can like change your hypothesis, revert that, okay, this is not affecting that thing. So basically you are proving your hypothesis that past experience, your new hypothesis will be past experience does not impact willingness to evacuate. Got my point, Rizwan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So of course that is a bit tricky business, so you can like consult with your advisor how to change your, how to like not change fully, but how to customize it or change it a little bit according to your findings. Okay. Yes. Okay. Analyze your data and draw some kind of conclusion. Okay. You complete depending upon the data you have collected, hypothesis is false or true. Then you might need to construct a new hypothesis or start the scientific method again. Okay, that's another point, that tidbit, that even if the hypotheses are true, you can test it in a new way, like maybe some new new statistical method, new analysis technique. Maybe that might help you in testing your hypothesis in another light, in another, you can say, approach or angle. And most importantly, again, I am telling you, communicate your research, publish your research. Without publishing your research, you are not contributing to the overall research or science. So that is very important. That is why one of the aspect of our degree in planning research, this degree, is that we are opting towards research, because in Pakistan, planning research is very much limited, or I would say very scant in our field. So yes, you need to publish your research. And if you publish your research, for example, by the way, if you publish your research, or let's say you just submit your paper and you get a very positive comments that, okay, if you answer these comments, then we will accept your paper. So that is called positive review comments. So if you submit your paper and you receive positive comments, only then NUST or the school will give you A grade in your research. So it's a part of your research now. Got my point? Without publishing anything, you won't get A grade in NUST, or at least in school, ski. Yes, this one.
So अगर पब्लिश नहीं उससे उससे क्या ग्रेड आएगा?
जी
I mean
Sorry?
कि अगर पब्लिश रिसर्च बेसिकली हमने पब्लिश करना जरूरी होता है ना, इसी
मुझे आवाज कट के आ रही है आपकी.
सॉरी मैं कह रहा हूँ रिसर्च हमें पब्लिश करना जरूरी है ना सर?
For A grade it is important, it is necessary.
और अगर नहीं कर पाते तो फिर उस लाइक वही जाहिर सी बात है ग्रेड नीचे आ जाएगा इसी तरह ना.
A नहीं मिलेगा आपको, कम से कम जितनी मर्जी अच्छी आपकी रिसर्च हो, आपको A नहीं मिलेगा. Any other question? So again, another way of doing a scientific method is ask question, construct hypothesis, experimentation, conclusion, and test if the hypothesis is true or not. If it is totally false, then you might have to rethink again, reconstruct a new hypothesis, and test again. So what I do usually, I ask my students to, that is why I ask my students not to always remain on only one hypothesis. If you're doing a research, construct 4, 5, 6 hypotheses. So there are more chances, there are very good chances that 1 or 2 will be correct, will be true. So that will, like, you can then push your research into that hypothesis. So always my advice is that maybe go for 2, 3 hypotheses in your research. That will help you because you cannot go to the field and collect your data again and again. Another way of analyzing.
सर ये 2-3 हाइपोथेसिस की रिपीट कर दें एक दफा बाद.
Okay. So if you, I was saying that if you test your research and your hypothesis can be true or it can be false or it can be partially true. If it is true, then okay, just straight away write the report and publish your research. If it is not true, if it's false or kind of a partially true, then rethink your hypothesis, reevaluate your hypothesis, and then test it again. And if then until it hypothesis is true. So I suggest my students to undertake 4 or 5 different hypotheses. So if the first is false, they can just move into hypothesis number 2. If 2 is false, then move to hypothesis number 3. So what will happen ultimately, that maybe there is a very good chance that maybe hypothesis, if 1 is not true, then 2 is probably true, or 3 would be probably true. So if probably let's say if hypothesis number 2 is correct, then I ask my student, okay, now focus on hypothesis 2 and develop your paper and your thesis. So I suggest the students to maybe have 4, 5, 6 different hypotheses to conduct their research. So by 4, 5, 6, I mean, let me put that can be kind of your objectives of the study. So let's put 4, 5 different objectives of your research. So that will help you in achieving your hypothesis. Got it, Rizwan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, most of you are more or less doing research. You are conducting your scientific research, but you're not like think about it in a way of process. So like Just see the another example. So one more thing that you need to know, you must construct your analysis or hypothesis that can be tested rationally. Okay, so do you want to
So can
continue?
you elaborate on that? What do you mean like tested?
Sorry, Salia again.
So sorry, I was saying, what does that mean? Like, if K hypothesis can be tested, like if we're choosing a very hypothetical topic, how can it be tested? Like,
Okay, give me an example of like your hypothesis. Any hypothesis you want to do a research on. Just I'll try to help you formulate this hypothesis and test it. Let's just give it a guess.
so like let's say colonizing the moon and how maybe urban planning would be done in the future.
Okay.
So how would we test that?
Okay. What you can do is now you can start. You need now data for that, right? Two or three different things. One is like, okay, you have the maps available of Mars. You know what type of atmosphere is there, what kind of uh, uh, let's say what you call it, encapsulated kind of homes. Like maybe you can construct those type of houses on Earth first and give a same atmosphere. Okay, so that can be another point. Is that is purely construction and maybe planning and design. Another is you start interviewing the persons or the maybe NASA officials or and get data from them. That do you think it is feasible to construct housing there? Do you think this kind of construction is feasible over there? Maybe you incorporate a planner's inputs. Maybe you go for data analysis from engineers. So this kind of thing can help you in uh, kind of collecting the data. And depending upon your data, if more or less your most of the, let's say you do the analysis and 90% of the majority of NASA officials or let's say any official which you interviewed said no, Mars we cannot construct a housing colony on Mars. So what your hypothesis is now wrong, it's falsified, but it's basically partially true. So now you need to reconstruct your hypothesis again. Got it, Salia?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so everything is depending again, like your was kind of a very good question, but it was very generic. So you need to define the scope first. Should you only be concentrated on planning and design? Only the institutional or the legal framework? Or are you talking about maybe social acceptability? Are the people willing to live in Mars or not? So you go and interviews people that are you willing to settle in Mars if the government is providing this and this, or or someone is providing this is institution. Are you ready to travel there? So maybe you can have a survey from the public. Then you can maybe have analysis that people in Pakistan are not. Your hypothesis would be like people are not willing to move to Mars. That is your in Pakistani citizens are not willing to move to Mars, for example. That is your hypothesis. And then you do a survey and then you test it and you find out, yes, you were right. So your hypothesis is true. So your hypothesis is done, your research is finished. Your cycle is complete. Got it, Salia?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, it is a very hypothesis generation. I would say that is time consuming and it really drains your mental energies to think critically, because more or less whatever you will be thinking, the most prevalent problem you will face is that research is already been published. So you need to have a firm grip on your topic. So what usually the advisor do is they give you they first ask the students that, okay, produce like if you have you have good critical thought, maybe you come with your own hypothesis, and if that is feasible, if that is doable, that is a job advisor to judge. Is it doable? Then okay, proceed with data collection. If not, then maybe he or she will say, okay, no, change this, change that. How about this? How about that? So maybe they will mold your, modify your hypothesis, or maybe altogether reject it. No, think about some other topic. So that is hypothesis formulation, and that consumes a lot of your mental energies. But that is a very important part. If your hypothesis is good, then your research, overall research will be good. The more, if you're clear about your hypothesis, better will be your research flow. So with this, I think I'll stop today's lecture. So again, if anyone has a question on the scientific method or scientific inquiry. Okay, class. So thank you very much. So I'll stop the recording.